So I did this a couple of times before where I write a review, but really I want to talk about like a specific thing. I just never really mention it in the title, but I think I'll mention it from now on. So this one's about Hello Lady. It's from the same guys that made Comyu, and I really like that one. They're both pretty like super chewy in different ways, but I preferred Comyu anyway. Sure, Hello Lady is a lot more consistent, but it didn't leave as much of an impact as Comyu did. It eventually came close, but that was with the extra routes at the finale. Honestly, it's pretty average with just the base 4. So the gist of it is that Hello Lady got updated a few times. It was only the first 4 routes in 2014, and like in the same week or two, the fan disc was also, it probably got released at the same time. I have to look at it again. Then way later in 2018, and Telekey comes out, and it's like the final route, and it's way better than the base 4, and it's even better than the fan disc. Basically because the fan disc wasn't supposed to be a new finale, you just saw here's new routes, and they're really well written. Like I said, I find the last section is coming to be better, but this also didn't have the subpar routes like Comyu that had either. Some of my complaints for it is the same that this one has, but on a smaller scale. It's like, except, you know, the 4th route that was considered the true route in 2014 version, that one was just really shit, but at least it became useful for the finale. It bridges things together, right? So yeah, if it was just the base 4, Comyu's way better. So the biggest deal breaker for people for this one is probably going to be the main character, Narita, right? Like, he's very pompous and he's very egotistical, so some are just going to be annoyed by just him constantly going on and on. Either you're going to love his ass or not, but it's always nice to have a voice protagonist. I didn't mind it, it was pretty fun at times, but the routes actually hurt him, because a lot of the dialogue is repeated, because like, well, you need the common goals, that's how it is, and you listen to them again and again, it's like, oh holy shit, this part again. Sure, what's being said is not always the same, it's just overall it's the same, especially since there's a locked order, so there's specific parts you have to go through, and it's like, okay, now it's A, then A plus 2, and it's, oh, now it's A plus 2 and B. It's like, okay, it's just more, but you always have to go back through A. It's like, oh, this is awful. Overall, by the time you get to the 4th route, the preachiness of it all will probably get to you, and that's something I'll talk about in the spoiler section. So the premise in this one is there's these people that are either born with powers or have an ascension later on in their lives, and once you do, normally you get recruited into the school. The main character's a little bit different, he's still getting recruited, but he has a reason to go there. Anyways, they're called HMIs, and because they're abnormal, there's already a few anti-groups for them, because that's like a normal cliche thing. It's like, oh, something has more than me, oh fuck it, here's a whole group to counter that. And it's kind of important, but not that much. It's something that you see in the 4th route, but the routes are locked, and because of that, again, you don't see in the 4th route because you have to go to the first 3. So you can only pick Tamao's and Sorako's for the first route. But really, Tamao is meant to go first, and even her ending will hint to, oh, like, well, now do Sorako's next. And that's actually a funny story behind it, because it's like, well, I actually like Sorako in the common route, so it's like, oh, well, I'll do Eru's route instead. Except that you can't, because hers is locked until the first 2 are done. So I got Naruto so butthurt that he just burned the whole academy down, because I didn't know what the choices were. So apparently him being an angry boy means too much revenge, and he just burns it all in one go. It's like, oh, that's pretty stupid, but I enjoyed it. It was really funny. I tried it a couple of times. I kept burning the academy down. So yeah, the common route is fine. I give it a 7, and it does kind of go nowhere for the last like 70% to 90% type thing, and then it ramps back up again for the last 10%, and that last 10% is pretty cool. The routes themselves are going to be in the spoiler section, because I tried to write around it, but it just got really annoying, and it just got super vague, and it's like, who wants to listen to this anyway? It's all about the characters, how the routes are, and how the finale goes, and all that. But before all of that, I can say like, oh, here's a summary of it, of what's going wrong. So like the largest ending for a while is that the endings are pretty abrupt, and they're also lower in quality compared to like the rest of the respective routes. So let's say in Sorako's route, it's like, oh, this shows, this is great, this is Nate, and then the ending happens, it's like, oh, there was no closure and there's no impact, and it's like, oh, now this is 6. I changed my mind later on, and I'll talk about in the spoiler section again. It was like, actually, her ending was one of the best ones. But like, we can also say on Tamao's ending the same thing. It's like, hey, that was pretty cool action scenes and what's going on. And the ending was like, oh, okay, this is boring now. And that's how it is. I feel like Tamao had the worst ending of the bunch, but that's because how it's written. Because Sorako and Tamao are just stepping stones for the rest of the plot. Sure, the others get the same treatment, but nowhere near to the point that these two get. They just get screwed over. But even then, it's like, yeah, it's pretty cool until the ending happens, and the funny thing is I found the 4th out to be the worst of the base 4, and that's because it just didn't know when to stop. It just kept on going. It's like, fucking stop. And that's going to be a huge part of the sports section I'm going to talk about. It's like, holy shit, you guys don't know how to do impact, and you guys don't know how to stop. It just, oh, holy shit, that route was bad. Yes, some people are going to like it, but I really doubt the majority will. I talked to a couple guys and no one liked it yet. But yeah, to be vague about it before the sports section was like, yeah, it just lacks impact, and I just didn't care because of it. Fan Disc and the finale were actually done well. They're a huge step up compared to the base 4. And here's the scores for all the routes and the endings as well. I'm not going to talk about it, it's just going to be on the screen because it saves me like a minute of time. Overall, I give this whole title like a 7. It's pretty good, and I generally had fun with it, but there's just parts where it's like, you could have skipped this. This is padding. If you can pass the main game, then it's all uphill after that. It's a lot more fun once you hit the fan disc and once you hit the main finale, which was added in like 2018, like I said. So after the common route, you know that this title is just a revenge story about killing the last 3 people that caused strategy that killed off his the main character Naruto's whole clan alongside his little sister. And that's like the main focus on him. It's like, you fucking killed my little sister, right? So like Tamao is like a 6, not much really happens. And that's somewhat specific to her because all these routes build up like on top of hers and Sorako's. But Tamao just has like almost nothing. There's a few secrets where it's like, oh, this is their affiliation. This is why she's in the school. This is what she's doing, and it's all cool. And she's cute and she's feisty, and their scenes range from like whatever to pretty cool, and it all centers around trying to get into the lab through the force that's protected by one of the maids. The thing is, the maids is a secret for a while, and it's like, oh, that's the point of intrigue. But the thing is, if you did Sorako's first, now you know, oh, that's what the maid is. So it's like one of the main focuses on Tamao's gone if you read Sorako's first. So it's like, what the fuck? So all she has left is what's inside the lab, but the lab is actually pretty fucking boring compared to the forest sections because it feels like a different writer just happened to write that section, and she's pretty much losing to, it wasn't goobers, it was like professionals, but even then it's like, you beat the maid. And again, the ending is very boring, and it's probably considered like the bad ending, really. So I'll be talking about Sarako's route later on because this is one of the main focus I want on this one video or this one blog post, whatever you want to call it. The only thing I can say for now is like, yeah, the actions are a lot better than what Tamao had. So anyways, Er's route was fine. I thought it handled it pretty well. It deviates from the other 2 routes where, oh, action was the main focus. And this one is like, well, here's all exposition, and this is meant for to bridge with the 4th route. She's the most funny of the 4, and her H scenes are actually some of the better ones since it's actually used for plot. The ending is cliche, and the final fight was pretty subdued compared to the rest of the VN, but I liked it a lot. If you can make a comparison, you could say it's like, oh, this is a way weaker version of the Berserker fight with Emiya in the Heaven's Feel route. And it's kind of an awful comparison because they're leagues apart. So if you say like, oh, the Berserker fight was like an 8, this one would be like a 5 or a 4. That's how far apart they are. But it's something they tried, and it's something that you can't even blame them for, really, because what happens is like, well, the Berserker fight is what, like 30 hours in, 40 hour, whatever it is, right? And this is like maybe 14 hours in, and that's for all of it. So if all you base it on is Eru, then this is like 3 hours in, and you can't fucking do anything with it. Because yeah, this kind of topic is normally handled for the main protagonist or the main heroine that's happening if it's a kinetic novel or something like that. This one's not. It's they're fucked from the get-go, and that's kind of sad. But otherwise, yeah, I know what she was trying to do, and it's pretty cool. The main problem with Eru's route was they didn't spend enough time building Eru's relationship with Saku. It was like, oh, we know Eru's really into Saku, and it's like, oh, I'm her knight and blah blah blah. But you never see that much. It's just awfully written in that section. Like the whole main focus on Eru's route is Eru developing as a person, getting more personality traits and going into more her emotions, not her relationship with Eru and Saku, and that's like one of the main things that they do. So in the main fight or the main confrontation, some of it was kind of lacking in appeal because yeah, there was nothing there to begin with. Honestly, a lot of it just gets carried by the voice acting and the theme that she's like, oh, she's finally doing what she wants to do. So Saku's route is honestly the worst part of the whole game. It uses information you gain from Eru's route and goes further with it, except it's all pretty bad with like really good shit sprinkled in between. So you learn Saku was being controlled somehow in Eru's route, and you figured out who's doing it in this route. I think the premise is that it wouldn't really happen if Tokino wasn't offed right away, how she was in Eru's route. So after all the romance sections are done, which is whatever, Sorako leaves the academy and is basically trapped by the antis, and the protag and the gang go and save her, and you learn, it's like, oh, now you know what Saku's power really is, because back then it's like, oh, she negates every other power, and also she has multiple powers, and there's multiple ways you can go with it, except they chose the most basic one, where it's like, well, I just create new powers from the powers I'm taking. It's like, oh wow. Like a part of me thought was like, yes, she's taking it, but not only the power, but they're taking part of their personality or their soul. And because she's taking so many of them, she's getting fucked over because like, well, now her base personality is getting overwritten little by little. But no, it's just, oh, it's this other person that's controlling her and that's what's happening. It's like, oh, all right, I guess. So while that's happening, the protag goes into the lab and kills off Tokino and Kurofune, right? This is also where they reveal Naruto's power, and it was already teased in Eru's route and actually caused some more problems later on. The fight with Kurofune is really bad due to its pacing. You're basically getting lectured by this teenager's monologue or this whole Chuny shit again, right? It's just a lot of jargon to try to make the protag sway to his side or to Kurofune's side, and the problem is that there's some fighting and then there's a lecture, and this repeats like 3 times, and it's just an odd way of doing it because I understand that if it was just the lecture's all in the beginning or all in the end until like the last 10%, and then the ending, the action ends, but no, it's like, let's keep having multiple intermissions. It's like, you're breaking the pacing. This sucks. Maybe again they're trying to do something like Archer and Emiya where they're talking while fighting, but they aren't talking while fighting because they stop. The emotional impact is dying every time. And like I said, this is one of the worst parts of the VN where the emotional impact is non-existent for the most part, or just not well done. So anyways, once he dies, you find the main villain, and it's just the protag's or Naruto's younger sister. And this is when the route goes to shit. So she was captured during the incident 7 years, like 6 or 7 years ago, but her HMI power is like, oh, I exceed or I evolve. Her power is called exceed, right? So I was like, oh, if you shoot her arm off, she grows a new arm, and now this arm can't get shot off. That's how it is. Except it's also made like, oh, any kind of mental attack is also, I can also block that later on. It's like, no, that's not how it works. You can have multiple things like that. It's stupid. And it's like, yeah, this could have been a cool idea if it was done with a different character or different. What I'm trying to say is like, she has no charisma. She just ends up being annoying and a brat, and it hurts the whole plot more with this whole section because it's overly padded up the ass as well. It takes forever to end and it just keeps on going. I feel like it went longer than the actual finale that was released later on. I think the finale actually written a lot better, and I think they saw maybe complaints on this one. It's like, okay, let's do a better job on it. And I'm already fine with it if it was just done well and she brings up more emotion or impact, because guess what? She's no Reinhardt or Wilhelm. She's not even Saionji or Kuki. She just sucks, especially considering her power encompasses too much, like I said. And to top it all off, when she's finally beaten, you get this like Evangelion congratulations scene. It's like, did you seriously do this? Everybody made fun of that one. Why did you try to do it again? It was so dumb, and I'm not even sure if the whole fight was a parody or that took itself too seriously or just didn't know what to do with it. Fortunately, that's the worst, and it's all uphill from now, and it's like way uphill. I don't know how they were okay with having the climax ending like that, but maybe I'm just too harsh and most people just thought it was cool. I don't know, I really doubt it, but who knows. Mori coincides with the 4th route. The story beats are the same until the finale, and you swap with Saku with Mori, right? So why is it better? Well, it's shorter and Mori is overall more likable and funny, and some of the fights are different. Like this time, the protag fights Kurofune near the entrance of the lab instead of inside, right? And you see the fight scenes between him and Mori as well. The lectures are gone and it flows way better, and the little sister just doesn't show up. Like, it was pretty cool, and honestly I prefer this as the normal ending over what was actually happening in the 4th route by like a wide margin. Mitori is basically just an action movie. It was done really well. There's actually a few cool scenes where it's more introspective and there's something communicating with the HMI users, and that's what's causing this onslaught syndrome. There's not much to talk about, but it does lead well into the finale, and it's actually just a huge what if scenario. There's like, what if Mitori doesn't die before the branching point? And that's because the finale is just another what if scenario where the society is cutting off funding from the school, so Kurofune and the gang do like one last desperate attempt to get some results in with the sister. So the sister gets unleashed again. She has a fight with Kurofune, and that was actually handled pretty well, but more importantly in a good time span compared to what was happening the 4th route, right? Everybody gets an upgrade in their power, and some are actually pretty dumb. The protag goes from forcing command straight into their brains with varying success to making the world slow down to the point of stopping if you had the right level of processing power. And a lot of it is depending, it's like, well, let's change how you perceive things, and that's how it is. It's weird. I prefer the original power, but hey, whatever. It works with what's happening in the ending, right? And even as a side note, I didn't really like his initial power. I thought it was leading his power to something akin to like, oh, mastery, where he doesn't have any crazy power, but that he just has a cheat to master any technique that any kind of human can is capable of. So I was like, oh, there's one random human that can like run up trees, well, he can do it too. And I thought that's how he's going to counter Kurofune, because Kurofune thinks of counter everything as well. Like what Kurofune had is what I thought the MC would have, but you know, that's what you get. But like I said before, it's hinted before in Arrow's route, and after that route I was like, okay, I just dropped my ideas, this is what it is. Sorako technically got nerfed compared to her own route, where it went from like seeing everybody's trauma to finding like these miracle steps and locations to always dodge and perfect counter, basically making her like the perfect hitman or reconnaissance. And now just being this black swamp that engulfs everything, and basically just turning everything to ash alongside her. Sure, it's a lot better for AoE combat, but give her any kind of firearm and her first power and she could do a lot better for most things as long as she has the right training. The rest of them just got powered up versions of what their initial power was, though I really don't remember if the sister got any actually like extra power up. The sister's actually way better this time around. Still pretty much a brat, but it went from like a 2 to a 6. And a part of it is because she's toned down a little bit compared to the 4th route. And this also kind of breaks her a little bit in the 4th route, because in this one, it is being perceived as well. Any kind of damage mentally affects her, but then Eru's power should have worked on her in the 4th route, it didn't. And all these little things, but we just ignore it, it's fine. Anyways, after a lot of fighting showing how each character is using their own like amped up powers, this higher being comes into play and was caused by Tokino like continuously trying to fuck things up. And now it's up to Saku, Narita, and the little sister to deal with it. And overall, yeah, this is way better than the initial ending. Hell, even the post-credit ending was great. Then there's some extras, and it's neat that they made some kind of omake style thing for like all the extra porn that you can just ignore it. It's nothing crazy on it. Anyways, now that I got all that out of the way, I can actually talk about Sorako and her ending, right? So throughout her route, she's seeing everybody's wounds, and to that effect, she's like constantly putting herself into the background, because like the more interaction she has, the more she sees and just freaks her out. Like her dad's using her for her power, even every normal person that knows what she can do would rather just avoid her, and her stepmom hates her guts, right? But still wants to abuse her power as well. So when she figures out that, oh, all these fucked up shit is happening around her for the last 6 or 7 years, she kind of gives up and tries to atone and help Narita with his vengeance scheme. And he gets like an extra 2 out of 3 in that route. And the ending, like I said, is really abrupt. They get to the church to heal up because all the damage from the maid and, well, the maids and Tokino, right? So during that time, it's like, well, Sarako's healing, and then out of nowhere, oh, she just left. And then like 1 minute later, they're planning, it's like, okay, how do we beat Kurofune? And then 1 minute later, it's like, okay, never mind, I'm also gone. And the maid's like, hey, he actually chose something aside from his vengeance. And so that makes Kurofune stay alive in her route. And yeah, it's abrupt. And it was kind of funny how fast it just ended. And I talked to some guys like, yeah, it's kind of weird. So maybe like a quarter way through Eru's route, I thought I was like, hey, actually this ending's really endearing, to the level of like how Rewrite handled Kotori's, just in a much more subtle way. And that's because Sorako was never anybody's priority. Yeah, she was important to the people, but never number one. Even Tokino still saw her as like an ideal candidate for Owl, which is like the top of the society, before she saw her as like, oh, she's a relative, she's really important to me. So for Narita to just stop his revenge scheme, especially when the last one was open and it was like, oh, it's easy killing now, it just made the whole ending more endearing, because like, well, he gave all that up because Sorako finally got something to choose her just for her. And like I said, Narita threw away his perfect opportunity. He broke his own promise to enact his revenge, right? And throughout the whole VN, the thing he enforces most is like, well, I never break my promise for anything. It's like, it feels like he self-inflicted his own power into him, so it's like, no, I can't break my promises. And he did so, because like, well, Sorako is still more important. And yeah, it's, to me, it's like, oh, it's short, but it's endearing. So yeah, like all in all, I had fun with it. I'm giving it 7 as a whole. Most of the routes ended abruptly. There's certain sections that got repeated a lot due to being like a common point for the second part of the plot. The final route for the base fan was really shit, along with bad pacing, power creep, alongside giving no impact. But the new finale made up for it, which funny enough also has huge amounts of power creep. And even the final ending was really funny.